Road trips. A time for fun, a time for adventure, a time for memories. But what if the best time in our lives suddenly became filled with danger? What if the desolate highway ahead stood an unbelievable horror? Or the person you were driving with turned out to be a criminal? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights, and listen to how these three people survived to tell the tale. It should have been a beautiful drive, but it was a trap. This story is why I always tell someone where I'm going and how I'm going to get there. I lived in New Mexico for several years before moving to the Midwest. My friend, Amy, and I are both females and would spend many days exploring the remote corners of New Mexico, discovering abandoned ghost towns and enjoying the quiet, desolate beauty of the desert. One afternoon in March 2010, we were traveling from Ruidoso to Albuquerque. Always up for exploring, we took a back road rather than traveling the more direct highway. One leg of our journey had us on NM55. It's a remote, teeny tiny 2-lane highway. We love those types of roads. Up until that day. This part of New Mexico is flat and desolate desert. You can see for miles, and there is virtually nothing except dirt and rock between towns, and towns can be miles apart. So we were on NM55 going north. After a few minutes, we saw a white pickup truck up ahead of us, going the same direction. Suddenly he stopped his truck sideways in the middle of the highway, blocking both lanes. We were about a mile away from him, and as we got closer, we began to feel uneasy. We could see no reason for him to do this. We were the only other vehicle out there, and began wondering if we should turn around, rather than coming up to him and having to stop. We were about a mile and a half away from him when he pulled over to the opposite side of the highway. But his truck was still pointed in the direction we were going. We tried to relax a little. Surely this guy was a rancher or something. Maybe he was checking something on his land. As we passed him, we noticed a few things. Number one, there was only one person in the truck. A middle-aged guy who never took his eyes off of us. And number two, he was talking into a walkie-talkie. A few seconds after we passed him, he pulled back onto the highway and started following us. But he never got too close. He would get within a few car lengths, and then drop back a little, and then speed back up again to within a few car lengths. We were getting nervous. We realized how alone we really were. We had seen no other traffic on that road, and we hadn't told anyone about our great idea to take this detour. We checked our cell phones, and neither one had signal. Amy was driving and speeding up, while I frantically checked the map, hoping to find a road that would have more traffic. There was no other road. We had to travel this one to get to the next town. Turning around to go back the other way didn't seem like a good option. After a few minutes, we saw another pickup truck coming towards us. He was going very, very slowly, maybe about 20 miles per hour, if that. This pickup truck was old and beat up, whereas the one behind us was newer. Amy had us up to 75 miles per hour, and we blew by this old pickup. As we passed, we saw that it was another middle-aged guy, and he was talking into a walkie-talkie. After the white pickup truck passed him, he pulled a U-turn and pulled in behind it. As we watched all of this, we could see the white pickup truck guy talking into his walkie-talkie. No doubt these two knew each other. We were being deliberately followed, and for the first time and the only time in my life, I felt hunted. They stayed right behind us. We watched for obstacles in the road. We truly thought old, beat-up pickup truck guy had set a trap in the road and our vehicle would be disabled somehow. We talked about driving into the fields, but this was obviously their territory, and we were afraid of what would happen if we went off the road and got cornered. So, we stayed on the highway. By now, white pickup truck guy was right on top of us. We could see him talking into the walkie-talkie, and he stayed right on our bumper. And the old, beat-up pickup truck guy was right on top of him. The three of us sped down the highway. The white pickup inched closer. His maneuvering and edging closer made it apparent that he was trying to bump us. I watched helplessly as he got within inches of our back bumper. Amy floored it. We were passing 80 miles per hour and edging up to 90. The road was flat and deserted, but any little thing gone wrong would have been catastrophic. We were absolutely not going to slow down or stop if we could help it. The white pickup truck pulled into the opposite lane and started to gain speed. The only thing we could think of was he wanted to pass us and get in front of us. If he got in front of us and his buddy was behind us, then we'd be boxed in and trapped. We looked frantically at the rocky desert on both sides of us. Our only option was to off-road it. Should we risk it? Could we speed through the desert and make it safely in one piece? As we topped a small incline, we saw a sign that says Salinas Pueblo Mission National Monument, and it pointed towards a road on the left. And right at that moment, a blue pickup truck pulled out of that road and onto the highway in front of us. As we came up on the blue pickup, we saw the plate that said U.S. Park Service. We looked at each other and then looked behind us. Both those pickup trucks did a U-turn and went the other way. We followed the blue pickup truck to the next town and made our way back. I don't know exactly what those guys' intentions were, but they weren't good. There was something seriously wrong out there. I notified the state police, and they said they would keep an eye out on things. This area is very near Belen, New Mexico, which is where Tara Calico was abducted. It's also about 100 miles from Elephant Butte, New Mexico, which is where David Parker Ray had his little secret torture laboratory. We didn't put all that together until later. Even though David Parker Ray had died by the time this happened to us, we do believe that there are others out there like him. And whoever abducted Tara has never been caught. Or maybe we came into a meth lab territory, but since this happened on an actual highway rather than a backcountry road, I tend to discount the meth lab theory. Whatever is going on out there, it's not good. So, let's not ever meet, or have anyone else ever meet, these guys. The Road Trip. A true account of a creepy situation during a family vacation. When I was younger, each summer and almost every New Year's, my family would pack the car and go on a road trip to visit family in Mexico. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in North Texas around 6 p.m. in order to reach our destination the next morning. So around 2 a.m., we crossed into Mexico, and that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the desert, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the cacti. We'd been in Mexico for about an hour and still had a few more to drive, and I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "Hey, that car behind us? It's been behind us since we left Laredo." My dad peeked at the car and shrugged off my mom's tension. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to another city." And he left it at that. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a wary eye on the car behind us. By this time, my siblings and I were hyper aware of the car and entertained ourselves with watching the car through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got pretty tired quickly. "He's getting closer," my mom noted, and we turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car, and on a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with another few hours until daylight. It was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense we've ever had. The car would ease off sometimes, only to press its binding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mother spotted a police car up ahead parked on the side of the road, and she didn't miss a beat. "Pull over, right in front of the police, pull over right now!" And my dad did, and the car kept driving. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been as he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The policeman came over and asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us, and the way it taunted us. The policeman took her claim seriously and told us of how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals, and then he offered to drive behind us for a while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved, until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting. Road porn. I'm not a trucker, but I do have a story. I was living in South Carolina for a bit when my friend asked if I wanted to ride with him on a road trip to New Orleans. My friend wasn't driving, but his friend was, and planned on meeting with his dad to pick up a package. Being a whimsical 19 years old with nothing better to do, I decided to go along for the ride. I didn't really know my friend's friends, other than the fact that he was Mexican and seemed nice. We drove all the way to the outskirts of New Orleans to a Mexican auto body shop. Everything was spoken in Spanish, so I just assumed it was a Mexican auto body shop. We were asked to stay in the car while Louis, my friend's friend, talked with his dad. I heard the word gringo uttered a few times. Next thing I know, two fresh Mexican immigrants who didn't speak any English whatsoever are wedging themselves into the backseat of the Ford Focus we came in. It dawned on me that maybe we were transporting illegal immigrants for Louis's dad, but I tried not to worry about the fact that I may or may not be a coyote. It was about 2 a.m, and I'm sitting in the back seat with our package when I look over and see one of the dudes we picked up had his computer out and was watching a movie. I peeked over at his screen and saw a monster cock destroying some teen's poop hole. I couldn't fucking believe it, Most people watch a TV show or a movie, but this dude was watching hardcore porn like it was no big deal, all the while we were elbow to elbow in the back seat. He looked at me and grinned. At the same time, we were driving right next to a semi-truck, and I had the brilliant idea to grab the computer and hold it out the window for the truck driver to see. He got right up next to him, and I held the screen out the window for this driver to witness the anal annihilation being demonstrated, and he started honking his horn like a wild man. We stayed neck and neck with the driver for a few minutes until we passed him, and when we did, he started to flash his lights and honk his horn, presumably as sign of approval. We arrived back home, safe and sound. I learned the very valuable lesson that no time is the wrong time for pornography.